afternoon. Canvas 26, Sydney. Nice to see you all. My name is Jamie Pride, as Bridget said, and hopefully I'm going to have a bit of an unusual session for you this afternoon. So we're going to try our hardest to have a session about AI without talking about AI. I know you're all done to death over the whole AI thing. So as Bridget said, we work a lot with boards, C-suites, and executives looking at the human side of AI. And I think one of the first things that I want to leave you with is the fact that we believe that there are two conversations that are currently going on inside organisations, and those conversations are often confused. So there's a conversation about AI as a technology, and I love it. I'm a technologist. I can geek out with the rest of them. But there's a more important conversation, and that's a conversation around workforce transformation. And so today, hopefully over the next 20 minutes, apparently, I'm going to be talking to you about the importance of workforce transformation, what we've learnt working with some of the world's largest organisations about what works and what doesn't work, and hopefully maybe kind of spike your thinking a little bit in terms of taking that back to your organisations and making that change. Before I start, are there any lawyers in the room? Just checking. Any lawyers in the room? Just for legal reasons, okay? So look, before we sort of talk about workforce transformation, we really need to start to talk about work, okay? So the basic fundamental building block. I know you understand work, you're not at work today, so you understand the fact that we can obviously not work. But before we start speaking about transforming work, I want to kind of set up a bit of a framework for you in terms of how we think about work. And I typically think about work through the lens of lawyers. So if you know, you know. But most people will engage a lawyer for three reasons. The first one is their knowledge of the law. Right? So in the professions, that's known as expertise asymmetry, also known as a big bill. I know something about the law, you don't know something about the law, and I monetize the difference. I know something about tax, you don't know anything about tax, I monetize the difference. And the professions specifically have been, really for the past 100 years, have been monetizing expertise. Now that's a bit of a problem. If you've been keeping up with current events, AI used to be called expert systems. Yeah? And so what AI is really doing is it's driving the value and certainly the price of expertise to zero. Now, if you're in the business of buying expertise, that is most excellent happy days. However, if you're in the business of selling expertise, that's a bit of a problem. But most people who hire a lawyer actually realize that it's not about the knowledge of the law. Actually, it's about the person ultimately who is right, not always winning. And that's kind of an interesting concept. If the person who's right doesn't always win, then that's really the real reason why we need lawyers, yeah? And what we're really buying, the reason why Dennis Denuto is $50 an hour and a King's Counsel is $5,000 an hour is really based on their experience. And what is experience? You know, we talk about this every day, but ultimately for us, experience is about judgement and decision quality. And really when you start to think about it in a legal context, we're really talking about judgments where there are two right answers. Yeah, this is very hard for AI to simulate. So AI will it'll lie to you very well. I mean, it'll decision support you. But at the end of the day, as humans, we have to make a lot of decisions where there's no right answer. Right? Like I may have a preference, or it could be about taste, but ultimately strategy is about choosing between two right answers. And I want you to hold on to that concept because it's something that we think is very, very important in terms of the future of human contribution at work. And then the last reason why you hire a lawyer, let's just call it the vibe. In the medical profession, also known as bedside manner. But this is really about empathy. Right? So ultimately, at the end of the day, you hire a professional who you believe is going to hold your hand and have your best interests at heart. And a great professional knows that they need to build a relationship with you beyond the transaction. Yeah? And so when we start to unpack work, we believe that all work is really comprised of those three things, but in slightly different blends depending on what you do. So ultimately, AI is driving the value of, or the price of expertise to zero, but conversely, then value is migrating to judgment and decision quality. And we still, as humans, we're very much tribal beings. So we very much want to build trust, and relationships are really important. And when we see organisations fail at AI deployment, they fundamentally misunderstand that work is comprised of those three things. They automate a lot of the expertise, but they don't really give any consideration to where the critical decisions need to be made and what are the critical relationships that they need to protect. You follow me? Give me a hell yeah. Excellent. All right. So the other thing I think to appreciate is that AI suffers no consequence. So I'm waiting for the day when a CEO goes to their board or to their AGM and says, hey, the AI told me to do it, right? I mean, good luck. And certainly I know a lot of my clients at the moment would love to send AI down to Canberra to sit in front of Senate estimates and have some interesting conversations. However, it's important to appreciate the fact that whilst our organisations are still full of humans, run and governed by human boards and accountable to human shareholders, then humans will ultimately be responsible from an accountability standpoint. So even though AI can support those decisions, the final decisions need to be made by humans. And so that really kind of leaves us with a bit of a framework within which then to set up a broader conversation with regards to the future of work. So if AI does all of the expertise-based work, then what's left for humans to do? Yeah, and I think it becomes pretty obvious. We spoke about the first one of these. We believe that there are 10 dimensions of persevering human work and contribution in the organisation. And as a futurist, I usually never say never. Like I was really huge on like OS2 and like beta videos. If anybody understands kind of that joke, that's a pretty old one. But ultimately, we fundamentally believe that for a very, very long time to come, humans will fundamentally be responsible for decision making inside organisations. They may use AI to support those decisions, but one of the most fundamental capabilities that humans need to develop is to improve the quality of their decision making. Secondly, and I've been proven wrong recently because there's a whole lot of AI boyfriends and girlfriends out there. I said AI can't build relationships. I was wrong, clearly. But AI can't build culture. Right? We are fundamentally tribal beings. We felt that during the pandemic when we were separated from people. Whether you're working from home or whether you're in a team, we ultimately want to have role models and we want to be immersed in culture. And AI just can't do either of those things, yeah? And so we believe from a relationship standpoint, humans, even though all our organisations from a size and shape standpoint may change substantially, humans will ultimately always be responsible for culture building inside an organisation, and certainly for role modelling, both in terms of the broader team, but in particular in terms of how we develop and apprentice new people coming into the workforce, which is quite a problem based on some of the things I'm going to talk about in a moment. The area that probably I've fluctuated the most on this chart is around sort of creativity. I would consider myself to be a relatively creative person, and we've seen really strong advancements in AI video, AI music, a lot of the multimodal things that we've seen come out of AI. But I would suggest that AI is a really good remixer of human technology. In some parts of STEM, like protein folding, we've seen we've seen AI create net new novel things, but mostly AI just remixes existing human creativity. And so we believe there's still a very small and important part for human creativity in the workplace. It's just something in our sort of DNA. So as we sort of move forward and kind of start to build out a model based on this sort of understanding of work, I want to tell you a little bit of a story. I have a shed full of tools at home. I love a good trip to Bunnings, not just for the sausage sizzle, but, to fancy myself as a bit of a handy person. My wife would suggest all this does is expedite my trips to hospital, or certainly increase the rate at which I put holes in the wall at the wrong place. However, those same tools in the hands of a master builder or a master carpenter build a house. And one of the things that I've been around, so obviously, I ran REA for a while. I've been in the open source community at Red Hat. I was one of the first employees at Salesforce. I've been through successive waves of disruptive technology. One of the things that's different about AI is who uses it and the impact that it has. In previous waves of disruptive technology, we have relied upon the digital natives in our business to embrace, adopt, and kind of push the old kind of dinosaurs into that technology space. That's happening today for sure. The junior ranks inside organisations are definitely using the magic cheating box. However, there's a bit of an insidious component to AI usage with junior people. Because unfortunately, what AI usage in inexperienced people does is that it gives them capability, just like me, beyond their experience level. Yeah. And so what it does is it essentially hollows out the juniors inside our organisation. Right? So anybody knows that if you give a good LLM to a junior and you say, produce me a strategy, you'll get something fairly good, except when you take them to a client and the client asks questions. And you go, oh, damn, I've been found out, GPT. And so this is a problem, right? We also know the converse is true. I'm sure anybody in this room who is an expert or certainly highly experienced in your field, you know when AI is wrong. You know when it hallucinates, right? Very hard for AI to fool you within your level of experience or your expertise domain. Yeah, you get way more out of AI in your domain. You know what questions to ask, you know what frameworks to use. And so strangely enough, we see far greater benefits from AI and lower risk in the hands of more senior people. Yeah. And so one of the things that is kind of a bit of a challenge inside organisations today is the real risk that we start to automate away junior roles inside our organisation. And the reason for that is they typically sit in this upper left-hand quadrant, right, where there's low levels of judgement and decision, but high levels of technical expertise. Like if anybody's worked with a grad, 100% of their salary or remuneration is based on what they know, and they don't know a lot, so therefore we don't pay them a lot. But if you walk around and experience a group of professionals, 100% of the vast majority of people in this room, your salary would be related to what you've done, right? Your experience. And over the course of our career, we're all working in an apprenticed profession. Some of us more apprentice than others, but we trade off our expertise for experience over time, right? We're trying to get immersed in repetition and in work. And I guess there's this dual nature of work, right? So work delivers the output, but work also develops the individual, right? So the more work I do, the more experienced I become. And when we take away experience generating work, we start to hollow out our organisations. And that's a real risk, right? We start to end up with this situation called experience scarcity. Now, I don't tell many people this, or I'd tell audiences of thousands of people off this, but I'm quite scared of flying. It's a long story. I caught it from somebody. But the aviation industry has been dealing with this problem for a long time, and I think it produces a really good model that organisations can start to consider when you look at what are safe to automate workloads. So every single modern aircraft that you've flown on recently can taxi, it can take off, cruise and land and taxi again on autopilot, right? Without any pilot intervention. Absolutely zero chance I'm getting on a plane without a pilot anytime soon. Anybody out there who'd get on a plane without a pilot? There's always one or two nutcases. How about $100 return to London? Yeah, see, it's always a price. There's always a price. That's all I've got to say. So the airlines have worked out that you still need somebody, even though AI will do the vast majority of the work in the future, we still need a minimum credible expertise in the business, right? We need somebody who can fly the plane. But more importantly, we as organisations need to understand and really monitor minimum viable experience. In the airline industry, it's typically measured by a number of thousands of hours flown by aircraft type, like he or she has flown 3,000 hours on a 737-400, usually followed by the airline crashed. But Minimum viable experience is really important because if you exceed that threshold, you break succession and career architecture in your organisation. So if we believe that we're working in an apprentice profession and we break apprenticing, then the real problem is that we don't have anybody ultimately to inherit the organisation from us. And that for me is a real problem that organisations aren't considering. I flew from Fiji to Sydney, not flexing, at Christmas time, but because I am absolutely frightened of flying, I know a lot about it, and we were in a nighttime flight landing in Sydney, full landing configuration, so gear down, heavy flaps, about 400 feet off the ground, right, at about 7 o'clock at night, and all of a sudden just boom, full power, just before we took off, gear up, flaps in, and I'm like, oh man, what am I waiting for? What am I waiting for? Come on. I'm waiting for a glass of wine. I've already had 7, trust me. I'm not waiting. No, I'm waiting to hear the pilot speak. Yeah, hello ladies and gentlemen. Don't worry, that was just a bit of a go-round. Yeah, really, really important. The flight crew could make that announcement. Yeah, but airlines know that there's a degree of trust between passengers and pilots, that there's this connection, right, in terms of doing that. And I think that organisations that automate without considering what are the critical relationships and the trust kind of barriers that organisations need to develop as part of a customer experience or an employee experience, I think it's really, really crucial and fundamentally not necessarily looked at with great detail. We've been experimenting on ourselves. It's an impressive diagram. We have been experimenting on ourselves for a while, and so a lot of people ask me, what does an AI native organisation look like from an organisational design standpoint? This is our view, right? And it's sort of close to the Jack Dorsey model, although I think I came up with it first, which is we have a really big AI knowledge core, which is a very big vector database that's been ingesting everything that we've ever produced for the past 18 months. That's surrounded by 9 agents that do the vast majority of the expertise-based work in our business. There's then a interaction surface, which also includes Miro, email, a bunch of other things. And then we have a small cohort of humans around the edge of our firm. And we practice what we preach. So the AI does most of the expertise, and the humans are responsible for judgment. So when we start to look at what roles we're starting to, or what work we're starting to put off into our agentic workforce, and we're running a bit of a show home, so they have personas, they have email addresses, they have personalities, but they do real work. But then we reserve the customer-facing work, right, and that kind of surface with the physical world for our highly experienced humans, which is sort of ultimately, for us, part of what we think future organisational design will look like, right? Where we are reserving the judgment and the strategy and the decisions for the humans, and we're offloading the expertise-based work to our agentic core. So I want to leave you, I guess, with 4 provocations or questions. The first one is, we see a lot of clients just redesigning old work. So are you just adding AI to your existing workflows, or are you taking this opportunity to actually completely reimagine work and to have humans do the work of the decisioning and the judgment and have AI doing the expertise? What capabilities do you think will become critical as expertise becomes abundant, right? Like if I can get any kind of expertise, if I want for free from ChatGPT, then what work is left for the humans, right? I would suggest high quality decisions. And I guess for me, the most important thing and the thing I'm most passionate about is work builds experience, right? It has a dual function. And so how will we build expertise, or sort of how will we build experience in a world where we're depriving people of experience generating activity by automating that work? We've got some answers to that, but I don't have enough time to talk about that. But I think it's really, really important that we start to think really thoughtfully, because I've got kids as well, like how do we build a career architecture and an ability for people to learn, grow, and develop in highly automated environments. And for me, that's the question that leaders need to answer. So every time I get an opportunity to speak to leaders, I say that it's really critical that you don't become lazy because we've allowed the organisation to do most of the developing work for us. We need to be using AI to build productivity for us and then ultimately moving that productivity into our own capacity to mentor and develop. So thanks very much. It's been a real pleasure speaking to you.